Meeting of the Committee on Human Services. To continue the discussion regarding affordable housing with emphasis on the Town Council's directive to the administration to create a rental assistance program and to consider an emergency rental assistance program. My name is Tony Palumba. I'm the chair of the Committee on Human Services. Carolyn Bays is the vice chair, and John Gannon is the secretary. This meeting is being televised by Watertown Cable Access TV. Any member of the public can join via, well, you already have it if you're here, but if you want to join on by audio, it's 877-853-5257, 877-5352. 57. Also, if you would like a comment, you can send an email to Carolyn Bays, Councilor Bays, cbays@watertown-ma.gov. And I appreciate if everybody would mute themselves. And so what I will do is I will unmute people when it's time to talk. We have a very nice group of people here. I think it would be worth a few seconds if we could. I just want to repeat what Caroline said. Any motions that are made tonight per the open meeting law and this use of Zoom, we need to have an official roll. I will call John and Caroline, and I ask Caroline to call me when it comes time to do that. Let me ask that maybe we could just take a moment and you can unmute yourself. If we can, well, I will do this. I'll unmute you and then you could start. I wonder if we might go around and say hello, calling over here to giving us your name and your role. And first one is, and why can't I unmute you, Laura?
I'm Laura Weiner. I work in the Department of Community Development and Planning, and I helped prepare some material for the Watertown Housing Partnership meeting that was last week.
Okay.
And attended that meeting.
Thank you. And Charlene, is it?
Charlene Bethel. I am from First Parish of Watertown. It's a coincidence that I'm the music director there, but I'm here on the behalf and with other members from the Helen Robinson Wright Fund, which helps with fuel and, well, our chair is here, so she'll tell you more about that. So that's why I'm here.
Great. And Anne Marie?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Anne Marie Gagnon. I'm the Director of Senior Services for the town. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. I know this is a really pressing problem for many of our residents, so thank you.
Okay, Steve?
Hello, Steve Magoon, Community Development and Planning Director, Assistant Town Manager. Been out for a bit, but happy to be back and looking forward to the conversation.
Roberta?
She's on mute. She's on mute.
I'm trying my best. Give me a second here.
How's that?
Go ahead, just introduce yourself, Roberta.
Right. Also known as Bobby Brown. I'm chair of the Helen Robinson Wright Fund Committee at First Parish in Watertown. And we, as Charlene said, we have helped for many years one-time assistance for food, shelter or housing, and fuel, among other items, other needs.
Jenna?
Residents. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenna.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenna Willis. I'm the Watertown Social Services Resource Specialist. I work for Wayside Youth and Family Support Network, and the Resource Specialist position is funded through the town of Watertown. I'm also looking forward to this. We work directly with residents who are experiencing severe rental assistance needs.
Jen?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Van Kampen with Metro West Collaborative Development, and we own and operate affordable housing in Watertown, but also over the last few months have been helping a couple of different municipalities put together rental assistance programs.
Thank you, Jen. Anne Marie? I'm hitting the mute button, but it's not unmuting. You want to unmute yourself, Anne Marie? There you go. Takes a little time. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening again. I think I mentioned myself earlier. Anne Marie
Oh, I'm
Gagnon,
sorry.
the Director of the Council on Aging. No, that's okay. Again, happy to be here. Thanks, Counselor.
You're welcome. Okay. Sybil?
You have to unmute, Sybil.
You have to unmute, Sybil.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm Sibel DiCarlo. I live in Watertown for over 10 years now. I work at an assisted living, and I'm always involved in community efforts and engagement, and that's why I wanted to participate and learn.
Okay. Jan? Thank you, Sybil.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jan Singer. I'm the Executive Director of the Watertown Community Foundation, and we've been hoping for this meeting for a while. As you know, many of you may know, we have started a community resilience fund. We have a task force, and many people on this Zoom tonight are on the task force. We also have secured some funds from the Mass COVID-19 Relief Fund, and we are putting it all to emergency rental assistance.
That's great. Councilor Picciarelli?
Vinnie Picciarelli, Town Councilor, Vice President.
Councilor, Town Council President Sideris. Where are you?
Mark Sideris, thank you for hosting tonight.
CPA Chair Elodia Thomas. Elodia, are you there?
Yep. Hi, Tony. Thank you. Steve, it's good to see your face. Glad you're back. And yes, as Tony said, I'm chair of the CPC. Thank you.
Sophia?
Hi, I'm Sophia Suarez-Friedman. I'm the community coordinator for the Watertown Mutual Aid Network, which is funded by the Watertown Community Foundation and through Wayside Youth and Family Support Network, where I also work with the Watertown Social Service Resource Specialist Program with Jenna Willis.
Leo? Leo, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Leo Martin, President. Nice to see everybody.
David? David?
David Leon. I serve as a member of the Watertown Housing Partnership. Good to see you, Steve.
And I don't know who's on the phone. Does the person on the phone want to say hi? Okay. I apologize. Oh, there you go. I am trying to handle the mute and unmute, and I can have a lot of understanding for Council President Sideris, who has to do this. And I hit the mute button. It just seems to take unmute seems to take a little longer than you anticipate. So I wanted to ask Councilor Bays or Councilor Gannon if they want to. Okay, folks, please mute yourself. Councilor Bays, if you had any opening statements or.
I don't have any opening statements.
Okay. Councilor Gannon, did you like to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Gannon, and this is my first committee meeting on the Human Services Committee as a new counselor. I'm grateful to be here. And just by way of background, my daytime job, I've been a an attorney representing many cities and towns in Massachusetts for over 25 years, and I've worked with a lot of development of a lot of affordable housing projects, works with some great community partners, and I look forward to seeing how Watertown's doing. And one other aspect, Mr. Chairman, you neglected to talk to Laura Weiner, who's with us as well.
Oh, I apologize.
No, he didn't.
Oh,
No, I went first.
I thought you went first. Okay.
I think
All right. So thank you. There are two topics for today's meeting. One is the directive that the town council passed in September of last year, September 17th, 2019, which was the call, and I'll read it in a second, around a rental assistance program. And more recently, a discussion around emergency rental assistance program. And we have some great news. The Watertown Housing Partnership has some great news to share about that. And we want to talk about that. I thought it might be helpful, though, if we set the stage a little bit to talk about what the state of the need is. And then we can move to the need and then take a look at what the Housing Partnership has proposed and what the Community Foundation is participating in. And then we can circle back to the larger, well, not larger, the issue of a permanent rental assistance program, as we had mentioned. So let me just start by reading the directive just from that meeting. Councilor Falkoff moved that the town council asked the planning department to draft a proposal for a tenant-based rental assistance program, including how it could be appropriately funded and staffed. Councilor Bay seconded that motion. There was an extensive conversation back and forth about the program, but eventually it was passed 8-0. 8-1, excuse me, 8-1. I should say that for those people who work in the field of affordable housing, rental assistance program is considered something about affordable housing. Keeping people in their homes is an important affordable housing goal. So it may not be the production of new housing, but it is important that and most people who work in the field consider rental assistance programs affordable housing. So I wanted to start a little bit off. As I said, if we do this in 3 parts, one is to lay the foundation for what the need is, and then move to looking at what the Housing Partnership has proposed, and that'll back us into the proposal for a long-term tenant rental assistance program. So I've asked Jenna Willis to just give us a little bit of, and Sophia, you're welcome to pipe in too on this. But Jenna has been compiling some data as the social service resource specialist, and I thought maybe you could share some of that data with us, Jenna.
Sure, thank you, Tony. So I did put some information together, so just bear with me a little bit. I've got my screen split so I can make sure I give you all the right information. I wanted to just share, I thought, some important numbers for us. I looked back through all of 2020 so far from January, and of the 234 people that we have met with, and that does not include family members, so it's over 400 residents served in the community thus far, that 49 of those were for rental assistance specifically. Housing and rental assistance combined is by far the highest need that we see in the community. And of those rental assistance needs, 49 thus far in 2020, 37 of those were due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think that number is staggering, that 37 of the 49 were due to impact of COVID. So as we're thinking about, the short-term rental assistance for emergency needs versus long-term, it is certainly a need all of the time, and we have seen quite an uptick. I realized too, I wanted to kind of start by sharing with all of you that we are very aware that we don't meet all residents who have these needs. So I just want to kind of frame that as well for everyone as you hear some of the information that I share, that I'm very sure that there are a lot of people in our community that either don't know the resource specialist position exists, that they can access that. We're trying to promote it and make sure people know, but I'm sure some people do not. And there are a lot of people that are trying to access other resources on their own as well. And maybe some people that we know just for whatever reason are not wanting to ask for help. That can be hard for people as well. So I just wanted to frame that I think these trends are very relevant for community members, but that it's just a snapshot of, I think, what's happening in the community. We are partnering with the Community Foundation to provide 25 $1,000 grants for individuals and families in the community that have been impacted by COVID. Their income has been impacted as one of the eligibility guidelines, and that they are in arrears for rent. And thus far, of those 37 individuals that have been impacted by COVID, some of them, fortunately, we were able to connect with some resources, and they seem to be pulling through this. But we have at least 28 families, if not more, that are going to be eligible for this grant. So it's more than what the grant will be able to provide for. And of those 28 families, we've been gathering more relevant current information for them as far as how their income has been affected, how far behind they are for rent. 12 of the families have responded to us, and I do feel that information is going to be pretty standard across the board. But of the 28 families, 12 of them, rent ranges anywhere from $1,000 to $2,150. And that higher end is typically for families that are in 2 to 3 bedroom units. And rent arrears are varying from 1 month up to 4 months. So there are families in our community that owe upwards of $4,000 or $5,000 in back due rent, and really don't know what they're going to do if they're not able to pay that back come the end of, or mid-August, I believe, is when the moratorium on evictions is up. So a lot of families with high stress and trying to take care of their kids and their families as well. I did want to just note too that as the resource specialist program, we are trying our best to connect people to other resources that exist on the state and federal level as well. So we have connected families to the RAFT Residential Assistance for Families in Transition program. We've connected many families, and many of them have not heard back for at least a month. So that's some time that's going by that they still are not able to support rent, and haven't had a lot of follow-up for some families as well. We are trying to really be advocates for them, but that is a program, I think, that is overwhelmed by the number of families that are needing assistance right now. So it's not an option for everyone. And another program that we typically tap into at the Brookline Center for Mental Health, which does serve Watertown residents, they've been a really great ally in this for us. Cannot accept applications now unless there is an eviction in place. So for people that their income was impacted by COVID and they fall within that moratorium on eviction phase, they're not eligible for that program. So it's kind of cut our resources in half there. And some of our local grant fund sources are amazing. We're so appreciative to be able to reach out to them for smaller needs. But rent assistance is such a big need that only, partial payment can be supported. And families really need more than that right now.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you very much for the figures and the presentation. I just want to offer, Sophia, I know you work closely with Jenna. Did you want to offer anything before we move on?
I think that she covered everything. The only thing that I would just highlight again is that there are these other programs that are able to support people in kind of paying for groceries. Mutual aid is able to help support people in a lot of different ways to help cut their costs, and that by no means is able to support them with rental assistance. And so sometimes I think that they're coming to us just for the smaller things that they know are an easier ask when they really have bigger costs that they're worried about.
So those figures of 12 out of 28 already, and you're just about used up on the money, is really significant if you think about the people who are in arrears. I thought maybe it would be helpful if, before I move to Jen and talk about unemployment in Watertown, I thought maybe if there's Roberta, if you wanted to share, Roberta, if you wanted to share any of the kind of requests you get around rental assistance. Anything that you'd like to share about what kind of requests you're getting?
Well, we work closely with Jenna. She's aware of what the Helen Robinson Wright Fund can do. And yes, we certainly have had requests for help with rent. And it's we can help to a certain extent, but we aren't able to help with a full month's rent, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anne Marie, would you like to just add anything? I know you also work closely with Jenna, but please, any information you have in terms of what you're feeling, what your feelings about. Okay.
I think at this time it's similar to what they're saying. We have folks who come to us for other ancillary needs. I apologize for the dog. Other ancillary needs, and at this time, I think it's the family piece that's most affected right now.
Okay, great. One of the things that we were looking at before we asked Jan to speak, and Jen Van Kampen is going to speak a few times because she has a couple of different important pieces to talk about, but I'd like her to just talk a little bit about the recent, and I was going to put it up on the screen, but we're not allowed to do that, I don't think. The latest unemployment figures, Jan, in Watertown?
Sure. So the Department of Unemployment Assistance does produce some decent data, and you can type in the town you want to look at, and Watertown's unemployment numbers for April 2020 is 11.9%. And I didn't double check this, but I'm guessing 1 year ago it was probably around 2%. So 11.9 is very high for Watertown. It is, of course, not as high as some other communities in the state that have really been crushed by this, but it does mean there's 2,400 individuals in Watertown currently collecting unemployment benefits. So that's a lot of people, and most people don't get that much for unemployment. It's interesting. I think we all seem to think, oh, unemployment makes people whole, but it really, really doesn't. So I think that might inform us a little bit about the need that maybe is not out there, this month, but the longer people are on unemployment, the harder it's going to be to pay their rent, for sure.
Thanks, Jen. That figure of I think it was 2.5 before it jumped to 11.9. So
sounds about right.
I just wanted to share a piece of data that I found interesting too. This is actually from the Massachusetts, I'm sorry, Massachusetts Association, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council is the council for us, the plans. They've been doing a study right along in April they began it. They did another one at the end of April, and they did one in May. But they've been looking at data for each community, and they're looking at how much people would be, how much rental assistance might be needed or housing assistance might be needed. This is both mortgage and rental, but they're talking about the potential for $650,000 in need in terms of money that might be needed in the future for other people, for us all to be caught up. And they have us having the unemployment claims, as you say, Jen, very close with 2,800, 2,300 unemployment claims. So it's clear we have an issue here in Watertown that people may not see every day. So before we move a little bit further into this and talk about what the program that Metro West Community Collaborative is putting together, let me ask Jan Singer from the Community Foundation if they wants to share a little bit about why you decided to stick $25,000 into a program.
Sure, thanks, Tony. And I've been working very closely with Jen and with Jenna and with Sophia and with Anne Marie and with Steve Magoon. We're glad you're back on our task force. So when we first started the Community Resilience Fund back in March 23rd, I think we actually kicked it off, and we had a task force immediately. We were able to raise in quick time about $100,000, which is terrific. We're delighted, but $100,000 when it comes to rent doesn't go very far. And then when the Massachusetts COVID-19 Relief Fund began, they wanted to work with community foundations to get money out into the communities and work with people who knew how to get money deployed very quickly. So there have been several waves of this big foundation, of this big fund, and we have been in wave 5. We just found out we got $25,000, and working with Jenna and Jen Van Camp, and we quickly came up with a way to use that money for, as Jen mentioned, for Watertown residents who are in arrears because of COVID-19. And so that money has come in, it's going to Jen, it's going out. And the whole idea behind the COVID-19 fund, the relief fund, is that it has to go out very quickly. This fund is finite, it will end, and when it ends, that's it. We have to report within 2 weeks after we get the money. So it's a very fast turnaround. And that's why it's been great working with Jenna and Jen, because they know how to get, they know who needs the money and how to get it out the door quickly. So that's where we are right now. So that's wave 5. We've also been invited to apply for wave 6. And it's clear to me that rental assistance, emergency rental assistance, is really, has the biggest impact in a short amount of time. And so we're going to be applying once again in another week actually by Thursday. I mean, this is very fast and furious that it comes. And then that will be it. And that's it. So it's not going to last forever. It might help people in July and maybe some people in August, just based on when the money comes in and goes out. But that's all we have. You know, the Community Resilience Fund was not intended to be a rental assistance program. It's intended to be to help with more immediate needs for food insecure, for delivery, things like that. We were able to get some hotspots out in town so people, and we got computers into the hands of people who needed them. That's the type of thing that a community resilience fund of our size can do. We just can't support rental assistance on an ongoing basis. This was just an opportunity that we were able to act on quickly.
Just, John or Caroline, do you have any questions as we're moving forward? I'm sorry.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm wondering if we should wait until we hear from everybody.
Yeah, that's Chairman.
Okay. I just want to take a moment first off to thank Jan and the Community Foundation for all the work they've been doing. It's really been helpful in Watertown, and I think everybody knows that. And you're supporting Sophia to work with Jen has been wonderful. The Mutual Aid Fund program has really been great. I do want to take a moment to introduce Fred Reynolds, who's is with us today. He's the chair of the Watertown Housing Partnership, who's joined us. Cliff Cook has also joined us. He's a member of the Watertown Housing Partnership, along with David Leone and Fred, and then John Bakian, who is a member, along with Elodia, of the Community Preservation Committee. So thank you all for coming to the meeting tonight. So we've gotten an idea. I did sort of run that short. I didn't want to repeat this if I could, and I don't have the URL with me handy, but I did want to sort of repeat what I said earlier about this Metropolitan Area Planning Council's study, which I think just reinforces the information that Jen Van Campen shared with us about unemployment. It reinforces the information that Jenna served us about who's in arrears and how bad this was going to be. I think people are concerned because pretty soon that $600 weekly supplement is going to come to an end. That's number one. And as mentioned, I think Jenna mentioned this also, that if things go as they're supposed to be happening, well, that 600 supplement stops on July 30th, which is only a month and a half away. And then on August 18th, it's more than likely the eviction moratorium will end. And then we're going to see a situation where many more people are going to be in need. And how does that sort of play out is the MAPC did this study that says the total need for each community, the total need of estimated housing assistance that will be needed in each of the municipalities in Massachusetts after CARES Act expanded employment benefits ends. Now, this is based on unemployment rates, on the cost of housing, the wages workers made before the COVID layoff. So when I gave you the figure of $651,000 is what might be needed if all the folks in Watertown became whole again. And so I just wanted to share that to sort of reemphasize what a challenge we have for ourselves. So we could move to asking Jen, if you would sort of explain, and let me see, how should we do this? Should we bring Laura in to talk about the housing partnership and then talk about, Jen can explain. Oh, I'm sorry, John. Yes.
I think my question would help before others speak. Knowing that there's a critical need for matching people with the available assistance, how do we reach out to this population in Watertown that, folks that don't know of programs available? What are we doing to communicate that? And is there something more that the town can do to get the word out?
Yeah, could you hold that question, John? Because I think we're going to come to that and by the time we finish tonight. I think we'll get to that definitely. I thought maybe what we would do would just have the Laura Weiner, who is filling in for our housing, or the lack of a housing planner, but who's been working closely with the housing partnership. And of course, if Cliff or David or Fred want to jump in, could tell us what the partnership passed recently.
I will be happy to read to you the motion that they passed because I have it here in front of me, and then I'll defer to Fred or anyone else in the partnership to discuss how they arrived there. But I'm thinking maybe no one else has this written down, so I'll read it. A motion by Cliff Cook to allocate $175,000 from the CDBG program income account for an emergency rental assistance program that offers up to 3 months subsidy to renters at or below 80% of median income, to be administered by Metro West Collaborative Development. Subsidy amounts recommended to be at a rate of $750 for 1-bedroom apartment, $950 for 2-bedroom apartment, and $1,150 for a 3-bedroom apartment. Voted unanimously, yeah, that's the motion.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Before we have Jen jump into the bigger discussion about what this program is that the Housing Partnership has decided to hire Metro West Collaborative, maybe if Cliff, or let me start with Fred. If Fred wants to say anything, and then we'll ask Cliff and ask David if they have any comments about this, how they came to agree upon this. Hang on, Fred, got to unmute you. Almost. Can you unmute yourself, Fred? Because it's a little slow here. And David and Cliff, can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Okay. Well, we discussed what we would do and what kind of funding we would use. We do not have set up a housing trust fund although we do have funds that are in accounts that are for the housing partnership. The housing partnership has money that does not have strings on it, and it has additional money, which is so-called home funds. The home funds have many strings attached. And the bottom line is the paperwork is so extensive that it would have to be a lot of paperwork filed individually at each award. So if you give 30 awards, you've got 30 packets of paperwork. Metro West is not equipped to do that, and certainly there's no staffing that the town has for that. So we have $200,000 that we really cannot spend in this way. We have about 600,000 of other monies, of which we allocated to 175. And it is for households at 80% area median income or less. So it's not going to cover all the needs of Watertown. And we're hoping that the CPC can get up and running and then pick up the slack, or some other source of funding can be found.
Thank you, Dave, Fred. Cliff or David, do you want to say anything?
Tony, this is Cliff.
Hi, Cliff.
Thank you for letting me speak. My apologies for joining the meeting late. I just want to second what Fred said. The Housing Partnership took a look at what we have available. I think the money we have, we think could probably serve 50 families for 3 months, taking into, assuming a 2-bedroom unit, Metro West fee, which I think is very reasonable for the amount of work that'll be involved. We realize that this potentially is a drop in the bucket. I am aware the MAPC did come out today, that closely at it, but I did look at one town I'm more familiar with, and the numbers are really pretty scary. One can only hope the economy improves and doesn't find actually a bit on their own. But I think, if this situation drags on, Fred is correct. The partnership can take another look at the limited amount of funds we have available, but we're really, this town's going to have to take a close look at how it can free up some CPA money earlier if it really wants to address this in a substantial way. But I think what we're proposing is a good first start.
Thank you, Cliff. David, from the partnership, would you like to say anything?
No, I think Jen will be able to provide the kind of guidelines and the process that she's set up for some of the other local communities and what was proposed to us and how we arrived at that motion. Okay,
great. I just wanted to, before we turn it over to Jen, I just want to appreciate the work of the Metro West Collaborative Development Collaborative. They have been our go-to folks for so many years, producing affordable housing in Watertown, but not only in Watertown, they're all over the Metro West area. They got some big projects happening, and we're very excited that they've taken the time to design a program that could help Watertown. I'm going to ask Jen to do this first, but just to give an overview of who else you're helping or what other communities you're working with, a little bit about how they're funding their program, and then go into the specifics in terms of eligibility so people get a real good sense of what this program, who could be helped by this program. And then, okay, take it away, Jen.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So we, and I apologize, some of you have heard me say this before, but we figured on back in March that this was going to be something that was going to be needed. So we crafted basically a skeleton of a program with input from the Mass Housing Partnership, which is a state agency, quasi-public agency that really is taking the lead on providing guidance around emergency rental assistance programs. So we've crafted this set of program guidelines with their input. And the idea was that we would make the skeleton of the program available to any community that wanted to use it, adapt it, and possibly implement it themselves, or we would try to figure out how to implement it on their behalfs. So we've probably helped, at this point, probably 4 other communities set up programs themselves. So they tend to be smaller communities that don't have large rental housing populations, but they wanted to have something available for their residents who might need assistance. So that's towns like Stowe, Hudson, Littleton, Lincoln. And then there's some communities that are saying, no, we think we have some more rental housing stock than we can really handle inside town hall. So they are in various stages of identifying resources and procuring, however they see that being necessary, a third-party resource to implement the program for them. So the largest community that we're working with is Newton. The city of Newton set aside $2.5 million for their program. It's by a wide margin the largest program. And then a couple of the other communities that we are currently working with, really right now it's fairly early stages still, are the towns of Easton, Belmont, Canton, and Marion. And all of those communities are using Community Preservation Act funds, with the exception of Newton, which also received some CDBG COVID CARES funding as part of the economic stimulus package. So in Newton, it's 0.5 million in CDBG money and 2 million in Community Preservation Act funds. So those are, and then of course, there are lots of towns out there that are considering this and exploring this and launching it that we are not involved in any way. Waltham being probably the biggest example closest to Watertown. They put in $1 million of CPA money, and the city of Waltham staff are administering the program. So the program skeleton that we proposed and that the Housing Partnership considered last week, as Fred laid out, the 2 primary eligibility requirements are that the household be 80% of median income or less, and that they have a documentable reduction in income be COVID-19. So that's important because if you're just a low-income person, this is not for you. So, for example, most senior households aren't going to be eligible because they probably have fixed incomes. In Newton, we are seeing, some younger seniors, I would say, people in their 60s who had second jobs, who had jobs in addition to perhaps Social Security or other retirement income. And they are eligible because they have lost their job because of COVID-19. And in Newton, I have to say, we are seeing very, very low income households. Imagine if you can, mom is a waitress and dad works at an auto mechanic shop, right? They both lost their jobs. So they went from maybe, $50,000, $60,000 a year to zero. And now maybe they're getting unemployment. They're probably getting unemployment, but maybe they're getting $18,000 from unemployment. So in Newton, there was much discussion about, the income limits and And what I can say is that most of the applicants are very, very low income. And then just as Fred said, for ease of administration and management, we recommend just a flat allocation per household based on bedroom size of the apartment. It just kind of keeps the math simple. People understand it. Because while you might be tempted to make grants based on need, right? Like, well, this family has more money than this family, so they should get more help. In this current moment in time, it's actually very, very hard to definitively represent what a household's earning, right? So in my example of the waitress is going to get called back to work, maybe. And maybe then sent home. Maybe she works 12 hours. Maybe she works 40 hours. Maybe she gets unemployment. Maybe she doesn't. It's nearly impossible to very accurately. We can kind of grossly accurately, but define, in a fine way, we cannot ascertain people's incomes. That's just the truth because it is such a moving target. So I would advise against programs that are sort of based on household need, because that's just too squishy right now. And the only other thing I'll throw out there is that with the support of the Mass Housing Partnership, we have recommended against providing assistance to households that have other public housing subsidies of some kind. So if they're a tenant in public housing, or if they receive Section 8, or live in a housing development with a project-based Section 8 voucher, theoretically, those households should be able to go to their housing authority and ask for a rent reduction based on their new income. Now, I think if Michael Lara was on at this meeting, which I don't think he is, he might argue against that. In Newton, the city of Newton leadership did decide to not exclude public housing residents or residents with Section 8 vouchers. We talked about this at the Watertown Housing Partnership last week, and the partnership consensus was that that the Watertown program should prohibit eligibility of public housing tenants and Section 8 tenants. And we can debate that more here if we want to, but that was a discussion that was held. I think maybe I will stop there and invite questions.
Thank you, Jen. Yes, I know I have a few, but I want other people first to chime in about, because that's the skeleton of the program. That's the program that the Housing Partnership has chosen, and they included in their calculations the fee that Metro West includes. So let's just open it up. Just raise your hand if you would. And Caroline, did you have? Go ahead, Councilor Bates.
I did. So yeah, I had a bunch of questions actually around this. So number one of the things that I think I heard at the meeting, at the Watertown Housing Partnership meeting, you're only going to give 1 month. So like for the family that's 4 months in arrears, was that true that you were only you just gave 1 month as of the time that you applied? Was that true? Or could you give more than a month? That's for Jen.
3 months.
Yeah, so we're recommending 3 months of assistance. We might have been talking about the Watertown Community Foundation funded program, which is going to do just 1 month.
Okay. No, I meant in arrears. Are you doing 3 months?
Oh, arrears.
Okay.
Right. So we are recommending that the support we'll write in the memo on the check for July or for August, for the month coming up. Now, the truth of the matter is the landlords are going to apply that money to arrears. Right. You know what I mean? But projecting out forward in some ways helps keep the landlord on the hook. You know, like, hey, you're in this program for the next 3 months, so don't evict anybody because then you're out a month or two.
I'm just asking that question because I'm trying to figure out where there might be some gaps, because at the end of the moratorium, they're still going to be in arrears, you know.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, and then I don't know who can answer this. I don't know if Jenna could, but given the need of almost 50 families, did she say, the $175,000 that the housing partnership, you know, how fast will we be going through that? Does anyone have an answer to that?
Well, Cliff, I think you made the proposal based on an estimate of how many 50 families could be served for 3 months, didn't you?
That's correct. That was my back of the envelope calculation. It would be approximately 50 families in 2-bedroom units served for a 3-month period. And you know, I do realize, and I think we all realize at the time, this is likely going to be a drop, could be potentially a drop in the bucket.
Right. I was just trying to get a sense of the time. I had vaguely remembered you'd said something, but I couldn't remember what it was. And the other question I had really for Jenna was, do we have a sense, an estimate? I mean, you said how many of our normal needs. I mean, you said there were like 12 families, but you also said people don't know to come and ask for help. So I was just wondering if you had a sense of the normal needs, if this wasn't happening.
I mean, that's a hard thing to know for sure. You know, I can really only speak to who gives us a call and comes through our door or our virtual door at this point. So that is a hard thing, Caroline. I'm sorry. It's hard to kind of speak to how many people there might be. I know that we, you know, we don't speak with a lot of residents who English is not their first language. So that's one of the reasons I think that we're missing a big group of people that would really benefit from this program. That's just one of other reasons. You know, we talk to a lot of it's anecdotal, of course, but we talk to a lot of families that say, oh, we didn't know that you were here and we had this issue prior. We also have families that say, you know, we have friends that we think could really use your program, but they're afraid to call, or they don't feel comfortable asking for help. And so we know we don't hear from a lot of people. So I can't say for certain how. I don't want to try and guess something I don't know, but I would say that there are a lot of people that we're not reaching. I don't think it's all because of promotion. I think it's a lot, you know, just asking for help. There's still unfortunately a stigma related to that, and that's really what I can say to that. And just to clarify too, we have I know I threw out a bunch of numbers. There's 30 if we're talking about emergency needs, COVID related. It's 37 from our program that we have seen since mid-March, and they're all related to income loss in some way. Some of those families have been able to kind of piece resources together and figure it out on their own. So at this point, for that community foundation program of $1,000 grants, we have about 28 families that are eligible. So we will have to kind of look and see, make sure, you know, families can get in.
And how many families come to you normally in that period? Or you don't have?
Well, yeah, we within the whole year there are over 200 thus far. Over 200 families. We usually have about 400 individuals or families who come. That number varies a little bit, and I'm sorry I didn't have those numbers with me. But over the course of the year, there's, you know, somewhere around 400 families plus and individuals that come that have some type of need. It's close to 50%.
Yeah, but that wasn't always just housing, right? That was for everything, or?
Right. I was just going to say it's close to 50% housing and rental assistance for those needs, and the rest just kind of falls somewhere in, you know, public assistance needs and other kind of more specialized needs for people, food security, things like that.
So okay. And then my other question was actually to Brad or someone on the housing partnership. So I know that there is a little bit more money there. If we ran out of money, how fast could the housing partnership, if we didn't have something and couldn't bail you out, like hopefully we could, how fast can the housing partnership add money to that fund?
Fred, you want to answer that?
Well, the housing partnership is not able to provide the amount of money that's going to be needed. And the only way that Watertown, well, I shouldn't say that, I mean, because I don't know, but the only source that I know of that would be significant would be the community preservation money. And that program has to be put in place. And at that time, you could get some more money. Should the housing partnership vote additional money from their reserves, then that could be added, of course, to help with the rental assistance. But we started with a number, wanted to see what happens, and let it happen, and then we can hold a meeting and discuss it and see what we're going to do. I don't think that the checks are going to be going out instantaneously, and it's going to take some time for people to apply, and we'll see how much of that money is spent and how fast.
Okay.
Let me just ask a couple of eligibility questions and questions about the details of it, just so people want to have this in their mind. Jen, once, and we can come back to John's question about how it would publicize, but once it is publicized and up and running as your responsibility to implement the program, I forgot what the housing partnership, is this going to be a first come, first serve, or is it going to be a lottery?
So we would recommend a lottery because especially right now in COVID-19 times, it's very painfully clear that people who are not native English speakers and who do not have access to technology would be at a severe disadvantage in a first come, first serve situation. So, so I would recommend probably a 2 or 3 week advertising effort with a due date for the applications and then a lottery. We could continue to take applications after that date, but it would at least put that initial group of people all on the same equal footing in terms of access to the opportunity.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about what people are going to need to have to prove their eligibility, just so that people get a sense of the program again?
Yeah, it's not insignificant, the amount of paperwork. We tried to make it really easy, but you know, you're dealing with public funds, and there are fair housing laws that have to be adhered to. So, so for example, we need, we call them the pre-COVID and the post-COVID pay stubs. So maybe people who got a paycheck in March and then got one with reduced hours in May. That would be one way to show loss of income. If they are already receiving unemployment benefits, then that's an easy, they just forward that to us, the unemployment letter. We have also asked for current bank statements for all members of the household over 18 years old as a way to just kind of cross-check and make sure that there are no other undisclosed income sources. Those are the big things. And then of course we also need a lease or letter from the landlord affirming rent, which, you know, for many tenants that's easy, and for some tenants it's actually very, very hard because their landlord may not live in this country, or their landlord may be a bit of a scoundrel and unwilling to provide documents. So the first hoop that people have to jump through is just submitting the application and the necessary documents, and then the next hoop is this affirmational process with the landlords. So a lot of the programs, I've talked with folks who are running the Boston program and the Cambridge program, And their experience is that about 50% of applicants result in a successful program participation, because the more paperwork we layer onto people, the more people who drop off because they just can't quite provide it all.
And then just one quick question, the checks will be written to the landlord, right? Just so
Correct.
people understand that the check's going to. And then just a question about the two programs. If you're running two programs at the same time, the one for the Watertown Community Foundation, if someone is eligible for that, could they also be eligible for the one that the partnership is running?
Yes.
Okay. That's great. All right.
Can I ask a quick question about eligibility?
Who's that?
Sophia.
Oh, of course, Sophia, yeah.
Do you need a social security number to be eligible?
No, you do not. The landlord does, though.
Jenna.
I had another question about eligibility, just thinking about the AMI regulations for it. I just want to clarify, maybe this is an obvious thing, but is it taking into account post-COVID income as qualifying? Because I'm sure people would be well under 80%, and that just makes me think that we should consider, lowering that guideline to maybe 50%, just to make sure that we're really capturing people that are in dire need of this assistance program. Just a question.
Yeah, it is. Eligibility is based on current income. So, right. So as I said, most households that we're seeing in Newton are very, very low income. The one exception, interestingly, are people who work for the city. So we have a fair number of town hall employees who have been laid off, but they maybe have a spouse who still has a pretty good job. So we are seeing a few households who are at that 80% of AMI. I don't disagree with you that this might be an opportunity to reduce that income guideline requirement, but there are people out there at 80% in need as well. So,
thanks, Jen.
Any other questions about the program, its eligibility? Yes, John.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I want to get back to my question about notification. Yeah, we're dealing with a lot of new people who aren't on existing programs, who may not know the assistance is available for them, or they meet the qualifications. Is there anything the town can do to spread the word that anyone would recommend to? Just wondering what the town can do in that regard.
Laura, do you want to do it, or Steve, about what we're going to do to make this thing well known as soon as it's up and running?
I'm not sure I have a quick answer to that. I think obviously we'll work with all the various people involved that you've already heard from tonight and others, and do some pretty broad outreach. I think one of the big challenges, it's not new, is some of the conversation already tonight talking about people who have English as not their primary language, and making sure that we both make sure that they know that this program exists and that they can participate, and that it's not a federal program that might cause them concern or might not be eligible for, or things of that nature. So obviously we'll need to put together a pretty robust outreach program to make sure we reach those people, because an awful lot of them will be the ones who may be most in need. To be, I'm not sure I have a more specific answer than that right now, but know that is a primary issue and one we'll have to work hard on. But I think, people like Jenna and Jen and Sophia, and Jan all have lots of good ideas and lots of good contacts, and so we'll make good use of that.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
One question I did is so that, Jen spoke to this in terms of the potential timeline. can you repeat that timeline for folks here and give a sense of what this means, when you think it can all happen? And then we're going to come back to Jenna and on her timeline, which could be a little quicker, I think. Has to be quicker based on what Jan said. But your timeline, Jen, for getting the thing running for the partnership.
Sure. Well, and I would just add to the outreach efforts that working with the public school system would be really, really key. In Newton, the public school system has really stepped up and done a great job reaching out to especially non-English speaking communities. So we would want to tap that in Watertown. So a little bit, it's a question of, how quickly can we make that all happen, and how much time do we want to give? There's a trade-off between spending a lot of time doing outreach or hurrying up and getting those first checks of assistance out to people. So, you can't do them both at the same time. We'll have to kind of pick which one we want to err on the side of. But I think minimally it would take probably, at least a week, I would think, working with Steve and Laura to kind of, fine tune the guidelines, get all the documents together, do whatever contract procurement things we'd need to do, get that all buttoned up. Because we would need the money. We can't write the checks to the landlords until we actually have the cash. So there's that little detail. But then probably 2 or 3 weeks of advertising. And then it definitely takes 2-3 weeks to slog through all of the applications and get them complete and get the landlords on board. So I think that puts us, if we started tomorrow, that probably still puts us, a month away before we can write checks. So, maybe August 1st for some checks. Certainly September 1st. I mean, that wouldn't be hard to hit. August would be a little tight, but I think we could shoot for it.
Counselor, one thing I might just add, while the partnership is voted to go ahead and go forward with, using the dollars for this purpose, I think there's also an expectation that there'll be some conversation at the council level and some, agreement from the council that we should do this and move forward with it. I don't think that necessarily needs to slow things down at all, but I think it would be good, for a recommendation to come back to the full council from this committee that, that you endorse moving forward with that. I think that would help us in terms of going forward with the program and, putting all the steps in place, having the council endorsement as part of that.
Okay, well, we can come up to, we could do that in a few moments, actually, I think. Jenna, just in terms of your timeline, and Jan, how are you guys going to try to move on this?
Well, very quickly, I think that was one of the reasons it was a natural partnership. We've been working together for since all this kind of started too, but we already have the identified families that we can reach out to. And we do expect, some families like Jen was referring to aren't going to be able to put together the documentation that we're requiring for that too. There's still going to be some families that fall off of the list, I'm sure. But we do have at least 28, and just with the rate that people are coming in and needing that assistance, I don't anticipate having trouble filling those needs. We're going to hit the ground running as soon as we can. We've already started talking to some families about just putting together documentation so that they, we're not promising anything. This is still an application process. We'll see what happens, but we already have people working on putting together paperwork either for their clients or, people doing it for themselves. So we've already started that process.
Jan, you want to add anything? Jan, did you want to add anything, Jan? No. Okay. I just want to acknowledge, I apologize. All of a sudden, I can't get everybody in one place. I'm now down to certain people, but I want to just welcome to the meeting Councilor Feltner. And let me see if there's also, I apologize. Hi, Lisa. Thank you. And a woman, Jayan Kurgalians, welcome to the meeting. I want to make if we're all set with this, I'd like us to make a motion if that's what council, if Steve thinks that would be helpful, which I don't know if we need to officially okay the spending since the money is in the partnership's accounts, but I think getting us on board as a committee would be great. So I wonder if I could ask Councilor Bays or Councilor Gannon, maybe I should make the motion because I have the motion that the partnership passed. So maybe I'll make this motion.
Before you go into a motion, I still have some questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, John. I didn't apologize. Go right ahead, John.
So I believe it was Fred who talked about, I think it was the homes program that had a paperwork overload requirement. Was that my understanding?
We're not using
the homes program specifically.
There's restrictions on the money.
So they're not using that money. They're not. Yeah, they're not using those funds for this project because of the details that's required, which is pretty onerous.
Is it the paperwork required from the individual applicant? It's the program in general. Okay.
Yeah.
And I also had a question about, we talked about CPA funding will be helpful to the rental assistance program, but question for Elodie, I think. How far off is the Community Preservation Committee ready to start making funding recommendations to the town council?
We're shooting for September, as we had already projected before COVID-19 hit, to have the final plan come in front of the community. And after that, it would go to the town council for a vote to be accepted. We are dancing as fast as we can.
Good. Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing those questions.
Oh, of course. Okay, so I want to spend a little part on it. I know it's been on since 7:30, but I want to move after we make this motion. I want to talk about the future of a permanent rental assistance program and how that might come to be. So I'm going to make a motion that this committee recommends to the full town council that we support the motion of the decision, that we support the decision of the Watertown Housing Partnership to allocate $175,000 from the CDBG program income account for an emergency rental assistance program. And I think I think that's enough for us, and the details about 3 months and so forth. So I'm just going to repeat that motion for the secretary. I make a motion that this committee recommends that the town council supports the decision of the Watertown Housing Partnership to allocate $175,000 from the CDBG program income account for an emergency rental assistance program. Can I get a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, I got one at a time. So, Councilor Bays.
Well, before we vote on it, can I?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes, discussion. I apologize. Discussion.
So my question about it is, of course, I'm in favor of this, but is there any way? And some of my questions were leading towards that. What I'm concerned about is the money is just going to run out really quickly, and is there any way to add to it some way of helping with the funding of this? Is there any way to put that into this?
It's a good point, Counselor.
It looks like you might have an answer.
Maybe Steve Magoon can answer that question.
Sure. Well, I'd offer two things. One, I think the partnership understands that there was more CDBG program income that we could go back to and tap into if we thought that made sense. And I think once we have the program up and running, if we decided to do that, that could be done fairly quickly. I think putting all the pieces in place is probably what's going to take more time. The other option is that you look at some alternative source for funding and not the partnership and their CDBG funds. For example, we talked a little bit tonight about CPA funds. That process is going to take much longer if we decided to try and tap into those funds. Another option is if the town wanted to fund some aspect of it. Obviously, that involves a whole lot more conversation about budgets and where the funds come from and those sorts of things. So at least my recommendation at this point would be, let's go ahead and put this in place, take the bigger step of getting the program up and running and the mechanics working. And if we burn through that very quickly, then we'll go right back to the partnership and look at whether we want to contribute some additional funding.
Hey, I think you can, go ahead, Council.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Okay.
Well, I think you make a good point, Councilor. I think Steve answered that in so forth, but we could make a second motion here that we ask that the committee hold a follow-up meeting in early September with the Metro West Housing Collaborative and the Housing Partnership to get an update on the situation and where we are to discuss potential for additional funding. Let me make this first motion. We had a second on it already, so I'm going to say all in Councilor Bays?
Yes.
Councilor Gannon?
Yes.
Councilor Palumbo?
Yes. Okay, so that motion passed. I'll make a second motion that the committee, I make a motion that the committee reconvene in mid to August to September to review the program, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and invite the partnership, housing partnership, and appropriate town staff to discuss the status of the program.
May be heard in the motion, Mr. Chair.
Is that motion all right?
I just want, yeah, the motion's fine. I just want to have a question relative to
Yes, yes, discussion. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. And with regard to follow up on Steve Magoon's comments on additional funding. So is it my understanding, Steve, that the, say use of tax revenue would not be able to fund this program with the anti-aid amendment perhaps, or you mentioned that some money could be spent. What are the limitations on the money, the general fund money that can be spent for this program?
Well, general fund dollars have to go through, a budgeting process. That would have to, involve the town administration coming up with a funding source. And as you know, we're in the midst of budget conversations now. But if we were going to spend dollars today, we'd have to decide where that comes from in the budget. The town doesn't have pockets of money squirreled away that we can just apply. So we would have to have a budget conversation, and obviously, the town manager and council president, I'm sure, need to be a part of that conversation.
Right, and fiscal year ends in a little over a week, so FY20 budget funds would not be able to be used. But just say next fiscal year budget, we transfer money from one source into another. Can town monies be used to fund any of this element, any of this project?
Yeah, and I'll just say that from my perspective, I think unless we think the immediate need is volumes past what we're initially starting with, and at least I would suggest that I'm not sure that we know that yet. But unless we know that, I would say let's stay the course with the direction we're going and see where we are. As Councilor Plumbus suggested, we come back in September and see where we are.
Thank you.
Councilor Biggs.
So I have a question about the CPA funds. Okay, so hopefully we'll get the process done and we'll be voting on it hopefully on the first September meeting. After that happens, though, we still have to get the funds appropriated. How long would that take?
I think we'll leave that question to Alodia.
If the plan is passed, let's say, I don't know, and we're still got a lot to get through before September, it then has to pass the council, and then it's an application process and people have to put in an application.
But how long is the application process is what I'm asking, I guess.
What's your deadline, Alodia, for applications?
We haven't even gotten there, John. We don't even know if we're doing a rolling application, an annual application process. I mean, I'm sorry, we had a huge delay for the last few months. We've been scrambling of how to quote unquote hold our second public meeting, which you've seen all the things we've been blasting out around town to try to drive feedback to our website, to get input from the community. At that point, we have the Q&A at the end of the month on June 30th, and then we go right back into putting this plan together, getting the application process together. It's just quite difficult, and I'm not going to lie to you, I'm terribly disappointed of how little input there has been on the website. I don't know how else to do it. And as I said way at the beginning, we've done everything we can to reach out to this community. We're going to keep going, and by the time we get to September, if you haven't made any effort to get involved, give your opinion, whatever, it's on you. And I mean, I don't mean to be rude about it, but we have really tried to constantly recalibrate under these circumstances, and have had a tremendous amount of help from many people in this community to try to put this front and center. But,
And thank you for all your efforts, Alodia, and your members of your committee.
Pardon me?
I said thank you to you as chair and to the members of your committee for getting us this far.
Thank you, John.
Steve, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to throw out one other thing. I think it's important for us to sort of keep things in perspective, and it's something that Jan and I talked a little bit about, and Jenna and Emery, at one of our last task force meetings, and that's and it was also referenced earlier tonight in terms of talking about the creation of affordable housing and rental assistance. I think it's something we need to keep in mind as we look at, if we look at all the available sources of funds for affordable housing, anything that's in the town budget, anything that the partnership has, anything that CPA has, and we put it all into rental assistance, and that rental assistance, ends in, months or whatever it is, then those resources are gone. And while that's obviously very critically important to those people that are having trouble staying in their housing today, once that's gone, it's gone. And if they still need assistance and still face eviction, and or maybe they're back on their feet and don't face eviction, but we haven't created any permanent affordable housing. And I'm not saying that this isn't an important program or something we shouldn't do, but I think we need to keep it in mind of how we want to allocate those precious resources once we start talking about all the ones that are available.
Okay, let me have a motion. I have a motion on the floor, and to have a meeting in mid-August to September to meet again with the housing. That was second. Caroline?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes, thank you. I want to move, if I could, to this, and I think Steve was a good segue into it now. We were talking about an emergency rental assistance, and I do want to again remember, and I'm glad Cliff noted the same study that I was looking at of $650,000 that might be needed to make a lot of people in Watertown whole again. Not that we have to come up with that, but that is what the projections are come the end of the $600 a week unemployment and the August 18th deadline, the end of the moratorium. But that being said, this meeting was planned originally to talk about the directive that the town council passed in September, which was the creation of an of a rental assistance program, a permanent rental assistance program. And so I want to come back to that now and ask, and I know that the town has been hampered a little bit. Again, this was back in September that we passed this on the 17th of 2019. And I know the town has been hampered a little bit by the lack of a housing planner when we lost our housing planner to retirement. So let me start by asking Steve, and I know haven't been, maybe it's Laura I should be asking, where are we in terms of potential hiring?
Well, very good news that we have two excellent candidates, and we're just trying to make the final decision between those two. So I am thrilled that hopefully we've come to the end of being without a housing planner. I'm sure that many of the people on the call are thrilled, but probably none more than Laura also, who has been picking up the pieces. And while not only did we not have the housing planner, I've been out for a period of time, and Laura's done a tremendous job of picking up the pieces and keeping things moving. So certainly want to take the opportunity to recognize her efforts in that regard. But you're right. As you and I discussed previously, Councilor Palumbo, we didn't really think it made sense for us to try and administer, come up with a program and bring that recommendation back to the council, and then potentially administer a rental assistance program without even a housing planner whose job would be, part of their job would be housing. So I obviously had hoped that we'd have that person in place long before now, but I suppose one of the perhaps macabre benefits of the pandemic is now we have some great applicants. So hopefully we'll have one of them in place shortly, and then we can get back to the business of putting, doing a lot of things, but certainly putting together that recommendations.
Okay, well, let's talk about that recommendation just a little bit. And first off, congratulations, Steve, and to Laura. I'm sure you're all very happy, and I know we all are happy, and hope you can come to that decision pretty quickly and have someone on board. I know it would be great to have someone on board as we start the new fiscal year. But can we say that there's some things now that we've learned? Well, we haven't learned anything because we haven't haven't seen the results of the emergency one, but is the outline something that we can look at? Is that what Jen Van Kampen has put together, or would that provide some foundation for the creation of our own rental assistance program and potentially applying for some of the money from the CPA, since they have to put 10% into housing each time? There is some money there, as Elodia mentioned. We have a lot of big, important steps they have to take, and I really do want to urge people to go to the website and get your opinions in on the priorities of the CPC. But just to quickly, Steve, can we see this as an outline, as a draft, or serve as a prototype for a potential program?
Well, I guess I'd answer that two ways. One, I think certainly we've learned a lot about rental assistance programs, and without putting words in her mouth, I'm sure Jen would say she's learned a lot about rental assistance programs and putting this all together. And I think probably the most important thing is learning where the important questions to ask, where the important parameters are of a program, so that as you're formulating it, what the real important parameters to make decisions about are. When we talked about a rental assistance program, it wasn't necessarily an emergency rental assistance program. And if you take the word emergency out of it, I think that does change some of the parameters too, that that we might want to put in place for a program if we do that. But so I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, absolutely, we've learned lots. Does that mean that we know all the answers? Absolutely not. I think as we talk about what a rental assistance program ought to look like for Watertown, I think the first question will be, let's see what some of the experiences with this emergency program and how that plays out, what kind of response we get. If we do an effective job of reaching out and some of the numbers that were talked about earlier are accurate, we may very quickly be overwhelmed with applicants. On the other hand, we might, it may go a long ways towards meeting the need, in which case we would learn a lot of things. Another aspect of that might be that we learn that, yes, in this COVID impacted people, there's a set of people that need help, but boy, there's a ton of people that really need assistance that don't meet some of these criteria. In which case, yeah, then if we're going to do a rental assistance program, we target it to meet the needs of those people. So, I think there's a lot of things, a lot of questions still to be answered, and already has provided us a lot of information, but will continue to provide us with a lot of really good information moving forward.
Okay. Anne-Marie, I see you're shaking your head in approval of theirs. Did you want to, is there a particular piece of that that's struck home to you?
No, I do agree with Steve. I think this is going to be an opportunity to see what other needs need to be met moving forward and how this is probably going to evolve, as we make it work. So I appreciate all the effort on it. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to just have a few comments about what a permanent rental assistance program might, just a statement about it? We're going to hopefully rely on this new housing person to lay out the foundation for it, and we'll have plenty of time to discuss it at another meeting, but just want to give people the opportunity if they want to say something about it. Will? There you go.
Thank you, Tony. I'm sorry, I apologize. I was late to the meeting, so you may have answered this question long ago, but I'm wondering if both the emergency funds and the possible long-term funds would be available for undocumented people as well as folks who are documented or who are citizens. Thank you.
Jenna, I hear you shaking. See you shaking your head, Jenna. You want to, as a member of the task force that Steve was talking about, want to say something?
Yeah, I think we're just very happy. Will, the answer would be yes, that everybody, it doesn't matter documentation status, and that's something that makes me personally really excited about this program, because I know there are so many people that really aren't able to access so many things in our community and beyond that are here. So yeah, they would be eligible. And I can just say too, as someone who works directly with people in our community, there are so many people that we have to have unfortunate conversations with about, Watertown's not the place for you anymore. It's too expensive. It's not something that you're going to be able to support. And a lot of times it's because of emergency situations that come up for people outside of COVID. There's a lot of people that would need a rental assistance in the community. It's not always an ongoing need that they're always going to need support with. It's really, people have emergency situations that come up all the time, whether it's, significant car repairs or a loss of a job any other time of the year. And they just need a little extra support to bridge that gap. And I don't have the numbers for it. I'm so much more of a face-to-face person, interpersonal, kind of anecdotal, data. But I will just say that we've lost people. The community has lost a lot of people because they're not able to support the rent payments anymore. And I realize that we're not trying to tackle how much rent is regularly. I know that that's not what this is a discussion about, but there are a lot of people that hit these kind of emergency situations and they're not able to stick around. They're not able to overcome that here in this community.
Thank you, Jenna. And let me just say, if we haven't said thank you publicly for all your hard work, and you and Sophia, but I mean, you have been doing this for a long time. And we really want to appreciate what it takes from an individual to have to listen to stories and try to direct people. And so our deep appreciation to you for all your work. Steve, you wanted to say something, Steve?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, one of the things that we talked about before with the rental assistance program, that really wouldn't be at least as we described it before, help someone stay, and it would be a first, last, and security type assistance to get people into housing, people who didn't have that chunk of money to get into housing. So just in that context, if that's the way we structured it, you know, going forward would be something different than what we're talking about with this emergency rental assistance program.
We have to think that through again. I know that there was some discussion on the council, but I don't know if there's a way to consider having two parts of a program, one that is some of the emergency as well as the first, last, and second. I know that Roberta and Jenna, I know Roberta and Jenna and through the Marshall Home Fund confronts these emergencies where people, you know, something happened, the car broke or something happened, and whatever the situation, and they're just one mishap away from missing that rent, and so we need to figure out how to address that. I wanted to say, as if there's no other questions, we will. Oh, John, I'm sorry, John.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. So related to the, if I can ever get the hand back off, good. So related to the topic of affordable housing and funding sources, has the town ever considered the adoption of a affordable housing trust fund under Chapter 44, Section 55, capital C, and what are the considerations involved with that?
Let me take my first crack at that, then you can go, Steve, because that was one of the recommendations that we have made from the work that we did for a year and a half on affordable housing. And I think Caroline can also say that she's discussed that with other counselors, and we've discussed it with Steve and the partnership. And I know that the partnership has it on its agenda as a potential step in that direction. And I know that we as a committee, it was one of the five recommendations that we made. Was one of those recommendations was the creation of an affordable housing trust fund. But Steve, go right ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor. I would just offer a little bit of sort of background. Initially, when that discussion came up, one of my reactions was, well, you know, there's a lot of process that comes along with creating a trust. And quite frankly, the partnership is pretty much, you know, functioning the same way as a trust would. And, you know, what are the benefits, and is it really worth going through the process of creating a trust when we have the partnership? I would say that I think since then I've come to learn that there are some additional benefits, and it may be worth pursuing. And that's one of the reasons I think the partnership has it on its list of, you know, things for us to look at. You know, and administratively, it may just be that the partnership becomes the trust type of thing, or something along those lines. But that is something we're going to look at.
Good. One benefit of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is that CPA funds for housing could be dedicated to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, where the housing partnership wouldn't get the benefit of a combined pooling of money that the CPA would for a Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Just a thought.
Yeah, and I think we can pool funds in terms of how they're ultimately administered. But you're right, that wouldn't be taking CPA funds and giving to the partnership. But I'm sure there's some ways we could work with that. But we'll see.
Okay, folks. So we will be this committee will be reconvening at some point to consider again the long-term. Oh, let me throw out this last question. It's sort of been bugging me to figure out. No matter what the rental assistance program for the town might be, whether it would be a first, last, and the security deposit, or some combination with maybe a short-term gap, filling a gap on an emergency, whatever that might be. The question is, when does the emergency fund, how do we come to conclusion on that? Have we thought, we haven't thought through that too much. So I don't know if Jen has an idea or any member of the housing partnership have an idea, but if this thing gets rolling, we get the advertising, get the details in place, get the advertising out, and the applications start coming in, and Jen filters them through and who is eligible, and then some of the money starts rolling out in September. Do we see this? Do we need an end date on this?
Well, it's 3 months. And I guess the question is, when would we stop taking applications?
Yeah, because you could take applications during those 3 months, right?
Yeah, and I think we would want to, in part, to kind of inform the community need, which is something we've all identified as would be useful. So I'm not sure we have to set a hard date. I think once a majority of the funds are committed, we might want to stop then. But I think, as long as there's money, we should take applications if for no other reason to gather that data.
Yeah, I would agree that I think we should continue to take applications. And if you start putting out money in September, you give a check in September, October, November for certain clients who benefit from this program. But during those 3 months, we should continue to take applications and see where we are. I do think that there is the potential for some additional money from the housing partnership. And also by that time, we could think about for the emergency CPA money for the emergency. So I would suggest that we continue to do that. But I hope the town administration and the partnership would agree with that. Any last minute discussions or points? People want to make any statements or any points? Well, let me then just take a moment to appreciate everyone. I want to appreciate the members of the housing partnership. I want to appreciate Laura for shepherding that through when there was no housing planner. I want to really appreciate Jenna for the emotional energy that it takes to do the work that she does, as well as Sophia for the emotional energy it takes to do that work. Jen, for your getting on top of this so quickly, Jen Van Camp, and getting on it, giving us something to work with. Our appreciations to you and just to my two colleagues on this committee who really are committed to this issue. And we're hoping that we can continue our work around affordable housing and start talking about development of affordable housing once we get back to normal, if there is ever a normal. So with that, thank you to everybody for attending. It's 9:15. We've almost had a 2-hour meeting. It's been very helpful and I appreciate that. And I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Councilor Bays?
Yes.
Councilor Gannon?
Yes.